So here we are on International Women's Day, and Dan and I will now mansplain Barbie to you.
But we're both in touch with our feminine parents.
We're wearing pink and purple.
This reminds me of the scene from American Fiction.
Yeah.
Anybody know what I'm...
Yeah. All right, so I'm Pete Tyson. I attend here, Calvary Church. I was a film video major. Have appreciated film my whole life. I'm in video production, so this is sort of the night I like to put on. Our guest today is Dan Kunkle. He taught Bible, theology, and apologetics at Philmont Christian Academy for 43 years and retired in 2022. I was one of his many students. And now he's a friend and neighbor. He lives down the street from me. He presently, in his retirement, is teaching philosophy at Holy Family University and religion at Chestnut Hill College. He has a Master's of Art in Education, Religion, and Master of Theology and Apologetics from Westminster. He lives in Abington with his wife and adult son Brian, and currently attends Trinity OPC. All right. So I like, when I talk about movies, it's a little bit of context, and each movie is interesting, right? So if you come over the years, we've had different movies, and it brings you into different topics, and you kind of never know which movie we're going to show. So Barbie brings me down a trail of what's the history of Barbie. Well, just a little bit of context there. So the movie does a good job of throwing some history in it within all the other stuff it's doing. So we know it's a fashion doll created by American businesswoman Ruth Handler, manufactured by Mattel, introduced March 9th, 1959. So I think, is that today? No, that's tomorrow. That's the official birthday of Barbie. So. Barbie's been an important part of the toy fashion doll market for over 6 decades. They've sold over 1 billion dolls, making it Mattel's largest, most profitable brand. They've expanded into a multimedia franchise in the 80s, which includes video games, computer animated films, TV, web series, and now this live-action film. Barbie and Ken are the 2 most popular dolls in the world. Mattel generates a large portion of revenue through the related merchandise of accessories, clothes, friends, and relatives of Barbie. They call the other characters. Barbie was one of the first toys to have a marketing strategy based extensively on TV advertising. 2006 is when they reached the 1 billion Barbie dolls mark. 150 countries, they claim 3 Barbies are sold every second. So as the movie explains, Ruth Handler saw her daughter, Barbara, play with paper dolls and noticed that she focused on them and enjoyed giving them adult roles, and most of the toys in the 50s were baby dolls. So she suggested the idea of an adult-bodied doll to her husband Elliot, who happened to be the co-founder of Mattel. He and Mattel were very unenthusiastic about the idea. So she took a trip to Europe with her family and saw a doll called the Bild Lily in Germany. This doll was based on a popular character appearing in a satirical comic strip in the newspaper Bild, B-I-L-D. The Lily doll was first sold in '55, and although it was initially sold to adults, it became popular with children. So she saw this, brought it back to America, redesigned it a little bit with the help of a local inventor, gave her a new name, Barbie, after her daughter, Barbara. Made its debut at the International Toy Fair in 1959. The first doll wore a black and white zebra striped swimsuit. We saw that in the opening scene, and it was brunette. It's marketed as a teenage fashion model. Early market research showed some parents were unhappy about the doll's chest and expected it to perform poorly due to her adult appearance and assumptions about consumer preferences. But Ruth Handler believed it should be an adult. It sold 350,000 units the first year. exceeded Mattel's ability to produce her for the first 3 years of its run. So instant success. So she understood what little girls were interested in with her daughter as an example. As the movie also shows, the handlers weren't the straight shooter. There were some tax issues. But if you heard what I just said, she basically stole this doll from Germany. So Bill Lilly in '61 sued Mattel, a direct copy, and that they're misleading that they originated it. Mattel counterclaimed, and the case was settled out of court in '63, and then the next year Mattel bought the copy and patent rights from Bill Lilly for $21,000. And by '74, Ruth and Elliot were removed from Mattel after an investigation found them guilty of issuing false, misleading financial reports. So, of course, over the years, Barbie has changed as culture has changed. The worst dip in sales was 2014 through 2016, which is mostly the rise of e-commerce and the closing of the brick and mortar stores like Toys R Us, and the cultural shift in beauty standards, gender norms, and representation. Didn't really see why, but in 2020 they had a biggest sales growth in 2 decades. It's kind of random. Maybe people needed to play with things during the pandemic or something. They expect this film is going to create significant growth until at least 2030. And the film triggered a fashion trend known as Barbie core and the cultural phenomenon Barbenheimer. So if you remember, Barbie and Oppenheimer came out at the same time on the same day, and there was this huge, movies are just opening up after the pandemic, so people really embraced it, like, you know, the two opposite, bright, cheery, feminine movie, dark, dreary, historical, more masculine movie, and people would do double features. So it really would put a big rise in the box office during that time. The boys would go with their girlfriends to Barbie, and then they would say, now you have to see Oppenheimer with me. And some people combined the trends, and they wore like pink trench coats and played around with it. It was a pretty interesting time. Every movie theater had a giant Barbie box, photo booths type of thing, which is why we sort of did that out there. The other big thing was in the 80s, she needed to adapt to the times. So they decided to do some animated movies. There was a cartoon that was really popular called Gem. So the first 2 Barbie movies, she was a lead singer of a rock band. There's been 42 animated Barbie straight-to-video releases. Many of them are classic princess stories retold, like Rapunzel, Nutcracker, or Swan Lake. But scholars have pointed out how the Barbie films differ from other princess narratives and have concluded that Mattel intentionally attempts to remediate its brand based on feminist criticism through storytelling. So they've always tried to, the reason for Barbie was to show little girls they can be anyone they want to be. So that has always been true to their brand, even when they started dipping into other things. Then in 2001, the biggest sales competition came with the Bratz doll line, B-R-A-T-Z. These are little plastic dolls, but they were more urban dressed, and they really doubled down on this subtle sexuality of little girls. It was they're kind of weird, but they got really popular. The consultants considered reducing Barbie's breast size, but later claimed the figure could not be changed. Being consistent is her biggest strength.
She's actually anatomically impossible. Anyone with those size breasts and those size feet would not be able to actually stand up.
So that's just a little context, the history of Barbie. I don't want to spend too much time. Now, how did this movie get made? So Mattel has wanted to make a Barbie movie for a really long time. And in the 80s, they should be animated. What should we do? They were about to do it, and then that He-Man movie came out and bombed big time in the 80s, so they shelved it. So there's no market for movies based on our toys. Then Universal took a shot at it, but nothing came of it. The closest they came was in 2015, and Sony wanted to do something. I'm just going to name some names that were involved in it, and if you know who they are, you'll kind of understand. Writer Diablo Cody, she wrote Juno. Producer Amy Pascal, she has produced the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies and Greta Gerwig's Little Women. Taking this skinny blonde white doll, making her into a heroine was a tall order. So then comedian Amy Schumer became attached, but she claims to left due to creative differences. Anne Hathaway then was pursued. Then they got a new CEO, Enon Kreitz, and he actually started a Mattel Films branch. So they are looking to do a lot of movies. This is the first one. Sony's option expired and Warner Brothers took over, and he wanted Margot Robbie right away. So they started talking, and Margot actually co-owns a production company called Lucky Chap Entertainment. They've done films such as I, Tonya, Promising Young Woman, and the Hulu series Dollface. They wanted a lot of different story pitches from all writers around Hollywood. They got a lot of different ideas. Some were out of the box, some were more straightforward, but nothing really stuck. But Robbie Brenner, the head of Mattel Films, she has always desired to put the filmmakers first, ahead of the toys, because she thought that would attract top-tier talent. Telling good stories is telling good stories. It's about the script, story, cast, and filmmakers. But they always preferred to have a female filmmaker, as this is the ultimate female empowerment movie. It's the DNA of the movie. Margot Robbie wanted to give the audiences the thing you didn't know you wanted. And she thought of Greta Gerwig. And she said she'll do it as long as her future partner at the time, they got married like late last year, Noah Baumbach, to write it with her. So Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach are like independent film darlings from, he's a little bit older, he started in the 90s with some independent films. He's a writer-director, and then Greta Gerwig has started her career in the late 2000s. Her solo films, this is only her third film. Her first film was Lady Bird. It was nominated for Screenplay and Best Picture. And then she did Little Women in 2019, also nominated for Best Picture. So she's 3 for 3 right now with movies, which is pretty neat. She's next gonna do, she co-wrote the live-action Snow White, and she's actually been hired by Netflix to do a series of Narnia films. So that'll be interesting. So the risk was, from the outside, it would look like they just wanted to make more movies in order to sell, or make the movie to sell more toys. But they insisted that's not the case. They want to create quality content. When everyone here at Mattel read the script, some were like, wow, it's pushing things a bit, but this is a quote, sorry. We all decided there were gonna be moments where it might feel scary. We're gonna be rewarded. Being safe in the world doesn't work. We want it to be bold. Barbie is bold. She's done incredible things. She's a trailblazer, so that's what we did. There are many elements of humor, self-deprecation. We embrace that. We take our brains seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. So that's all well and good, but also, just to mention, they have like 14 movies in development. Hot Wheels, Polly Pocket, Rock'em Sock'em Robots, Major Matt Mason. So, you know, they say one thing, but they're trying to sell toys. So they wrote the movie together during lockdown. I'm skipping a lot here. I prepare a lot, but I'm not going to say it all. Let's get into So those who go to Calvary have heard me say, I consider this a satire. And for me, that kind of opens it up more to not get too bent out of shape about it, I guess, because, you know, the rules of satire is anything's open for criticism. The definition of satire: vices, follies, abuses, and shortcomings are held up to ridicule with the intent of exposing or shaming the perceived flaws of individuals, corporations, government, society itself into improvement. It's usually meant to be humorous, but it's not always. That opens the, so just something to think about. Just because it's satire doesn't mean you can't criticize it or not like it. But I think it's important to, if you do want to criticize it, you need to at least be aware of what the film is doing. You can say it failed completely on what it was trying to do, or you can say, because it did that, here's why I liked it. That it deals with existentialism, humanism, feminism, masculinity. So this movie's on HBO Max. It has 3 versions. It has the regular version, it has the version with a sign language person in the corner, and then it has director's commentary. I took the time to watch the commentary, so you don't have to. But so it's Greta just talking about the movie. So production-wise, it's hyper-realistic, maximalist. The absurdity of the beginning, you know, might have made you like, what movie am I watching right now? But the idea was, you know, how do little kids play with dolls if they hit a wall? They go, ooh, and like do things like that, or the car flipping. It has that idea in mind, and then very much inspired by 1950s musicals and sets, and just I guess, you know, a modern filmmaker sees those times as more innocent and carefree, and so Barbie Land was like that. But at the same time, the real world was not today. She was very inspired by like 1980s hyper-realistic films like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and things like that, big corporate. So even in the reality, it was still maximalist, still stereotypical. Still not to be taken literally as this is the real world. So I think that's important too, as you look at it, that it's, you know, we shouldn't really find ourselves literally in this movie. I think it's more concepts than ideas. But I'll end with this and hand it over to Dan, and then we might hop in here and there. Biggest thing I got out of watching it several times is, so Barbie in general is like, you know, a contradiction. There's all this controversy. Is she too sexualized for little girls? Is she empowering? Is she feminist? Did she help women? Did she hurt women? Is she reflecting? So there's a lot of juxtaposition in this film. While some serious things are happening, there's absurd things happening in the background. So what is this a serious movie or is this not a serious movie? The absurd and sublime are living together, and when things are over the top silly, usually the actors are putting their all into this. I mean, Gosling, he stole the show in this film, I think. He did incredible. Just is over the top, but then there are times when they have to be so over the top. They're professional actors. They have to put some humanity into it. I think there are a lot of moments where you're like, this is so absurd, but why am I being moved right now? And it's that thing that that the director doesn't know will happen until the actors start doing it. So the whole movie is like a giant paradox, contradiction, juxtaposition. With Barbie Land's a real world, you can almost take every character. And so I think that's really interesting. So I'll let Dan take over, and we might go back and forth a little bit. There are some things, you know, not everyone likes the film. I always do like to bring up criticisms. I think both of us are more positive about this film, so you'll get a lot of the positive reviews. But I'll just touch on some of the negatives. I won't have to say who it was or not. Well, I'll go right to the biggest criticism from certain, it's woke. Barbie's what you get when you give the reins of a movie about a brightly colored upbeat doll that has brought joy to little girls worldwide to a clinically depressed professional victim with a Mattel headquarters-sized chip on her shoulder. The only thing audiences should feel at the end of this movie is pity for Greta Gerwig's husband.
That's called cynicism, I think.
I'll stop there, but you get the idea. We'll touch on it. You all can chime in too, so.
Well, first of all, I'm really grateful, thankful to Pete for allowing me to be part of this. I don't think I know anyone who knows more about movies and music than Pete does. And so he has become my teacher in a lot of ways when it comes to film and music. My last couple of years at Philmont, Pete came in and helped me out with many classes that I did on music, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. The consensus review of this movie in Rotten Tomatoes, the critics' consensus is technical qualities, visually dazzling comedy, and visually dazzling comedy whose meta-humor is smartly complemented by subversive storytelling. And here's the definition of meta-humor, and it's going to resonate a little bit with what Pete already said. A type of comedic expression that is self-referential, in some way intentionally alluding to the very person who is expressing the humor in a comedic fashion, or to some specific aspect of that same comedic expression. In general, self-referential humor often uses oxymoron or paradox to create a contradictory or otherwise absurd situation that is humorous to the audience. Meta-humor is playful and it does not take itself too seriously. And so here's an example. I'm a self-deprecating comedian, though I'm not very good at it. And to kind of reiterate what Pete already said, when you enter into a world of a movie, you need to enter into that movie's world. You watch the Star Wars movie and you got to believe that there's sound in space. Otherwise, you might as well forget even watching the film. And so I think that the best way to approach Barbie is to allow the movie to create its world and then be willing to enter into that world and look at it, if possible, a little bit from the inside out. In studying the Bible, we make a different distinction between exegesis and eisegesis. With exegesis, we're trying to read out of the text. With eisegesis, you're reading into the text. And so I think that one of the things we want to be careful about not doing with Barbie is reading into it stuff that really isn't there, but trying to get out of it what is there. And for my own money, I think that there's a lot of really very fascinating things going on in the movie.
What's that? Going on that, within the commentary, so I know some people who saw the movie for the first time, and as men, and they were like, oh, I'm like a villain, men suck, and they leave feeling very bad. Then they might see it a second time, and then they kind of understand. While the Ken plot line was happening, she didn't really say, like, look at the bad men being men. She said, this is a Ken doll. He was created to be an accessory. He has no purpose. What he's doing makes complete sense. So she didn't see the Kens or man as villainous. She's literally talking as a director, and to give direction to the act. You are a doll with one purpose, and now, you had a Matrix moment. The real world was exposed to you. How do they take it in? And I mean, the best way to explain Ryan Gosling's performance is he acts like a toddler or like a 5, 6-year-old just ADD, taking everything in. He gets bored when something gets serious. He's emotional. She brought up, when your little kid starts crying because the sandwich still has crust on it, you kind of want to laugh, but at the same time, this is a legit painful experience for that little human in front of you. So you have to I understand why you're crying over crust, even as absurd as it is in the grand scheme of things.
And in a similar way, I think Barbie is going through the same existential crisis. She only knew this world that she thought was perfect, and then it becomes something of a crisis for her to realize that it's not the only world. There's a world out there that's not perfect. And then I actually think that she comes to realize later at the end of the movie that Barbie Land wasn't perfect either. She decides to leave. And so I think kind of in tandem, both of the main characters go through that process of self-discovery, which is painful. It's painful for every 13-year-old, I think, and it's painful for Barbie and Ken.
Any comments on why Barbie leaves but Ken does not? Barbie decides to go to the real world and be real. Ken kind of stays in Barbie land. Did I miss something? I just found that ending a little confusing.
Well, I'll take a shot at that,
Yeah.
and Pete may have something to say as well. I think in one way, the main point of the movie is that individuals need to choose for themselves who and what they are, and come to realize that they're not simply accessories. And so it's a matter of them finding their place in the world. And so Barbie, in terms of her existential self-authentication, goes to the real world, and Ken, in terms of his existential self-authentication, so to speak, decides to stay in Barbie land and, I don't know,
But he stays in the place
work for
where
a
he's
more
an
equitable
accessory.
society.
He stays in the place where he's an accessory.
No, because Barbie Land is beginning to change. Remember, they're beginning to make room for the Kens, and Ken comes to realize for himself that he's Ken enough. He's not an accessory anymore. That's his self-realization.
And in terms of the setting and things, they didn't remove everything that the Kens did to the dream houses. The ending, there's a nice mix of Barbie and Ken. The horse swinging door stayed. This is after the Constitution got, it's still Barbie land. But, so they could have easily wiped everything back to the way it was. And it's something Greta pointed out, like this is now, they're kind of seeing that every Barbie Ken has value in some way. It's hard to put our whole belief system onto it because they are dolls. So we can't get into like, oh, they all have value. But I do think too, with the whole, you can't separate Barbie from a feminist movement in some way. So this movie wanted to topple love is the final answer. They never kissed, they never held hands. Barbie made it clear, I do not love you. And, the daughter was like, what's Barbie's ending? And so I do think there's some of that in there. They wanted to purposefully say, this is not a little princess ending, not happily ever after. It's an individual thing, as he mentioned. So I think we don't know Ken's ending, honestly, because the movie is called Barbie, and that final scene was what about Barbie's ending, and then we follow that.
If you saw La La Land, and you're watching La La Land, and you're kind of hoping, if you're sort of in the traditional 1950s mindset, They're going to get together somehow.
Except they don't.
But they don't. They go their separate ways. She becomes the actress, he runs the jazz club, and my wife hated it. But the movie, in terms of the world it created, they found their person that they found themselves, and I think that Barbie does something similar.
What do you all think of the extended musical scene of the I'm Ken song, and it turns into a surreal dance-off type of thing? I mean, I've seen this maybe 3 times now. I can't put my finger on why it happened, but it makes complete sense to me, and how they changed from fighting each other to being bros. It worked. It's the weirdest thing, isn't it? Like, I mean, that's what, musicals try to do, tell a story through music or dance without dialogue. I thought it was a genius, like, again, I can't explain it, but there's something about the sparkles went off when they started doing like this Grease, Bob Fosse type thing, and it was crazy. And the movie's full of stuff like that. Like, why is this happening? I completely get it.
Yeah.
The purpose of Ken was as an accessory, but then his purpose got removed, and so his behavior became what we see. But are we ever told what I missed the beginning. What his behavior as his accessory identity was he just there?
He only had his only goal in life was for Barbie to look at him lovingly in the beginning. It's
And that was an acceptable goal because that's who he was. But when his purpose got removed, he became this whatever.
Well, that's why the writing in that one scene at the end, it's just that simple word. It went from Barbie and Ken to it's Barbie and it's Ken. It just individualized. So Ken is now its own thing. They can still be together or they don't need to be together. They're still friends. They could be boyfriend, girlfriend. I mean, honestly, Ken's named after Ruth's son. So technically they're brother and sister, but they turned into all sorts of different relationships in the toy world.
Do you think there's any commentary from the writing that when you take away a man's purpose, he becomes this whatever thing that was shown?
Well, one of the things I think that happened in the beginning, it's Ken, simply Ken. At the end, he says, I'm Ken. There's an identity there. He sees himself as having an identity rather than.
And that doesn't happen easily. It happens through crisis. It happens through him going through a stage where he's just a real jerk. But he comes out on the other side as a more mature person, I think.
But like either of you, if the Academy awards this film in any category, and I just regard it as fluff, it's just potato chips for the brain, something, even though it has a message, I'm just wondering if it's deserving of, Greta Gerwig.
So, yeah, when I saw the trailer for this,
The song is that song.
yeah. When I saw the trailer for this, it showed little pieces. And I mean, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I said this is either going to be like an embarrassing disaster or a genius satire that will be nominated for Best Picture. It could have gone either way because we didn't quite know what it was. But it had enough in it that looked like they're doing something weird here. So I think so that review I read where they're like, I feel bad for Greta's husband, he pointed out the production design and costuming. Like he's like, it looks like the creators of this movie hate women, hate men, they actually hate Barbie. But the people who designed the Barbie land love Barbie. So he was like, I think they're, and to give an example, this is again only through commentary. Movies do this a lot, which is why I do recommend listening to commentary, because there's lots of things. Movies are collaborative. So directors bring what they bring, and then a lot of stuff happens during production. An old adage is movies are made 3 times. They're written, then they're shot and things change, and then in the edit, things change again. So production, costume designers and set designers bring a lot of things and the actors bring a lot of things. So one example is the scene where Barbie ultimately, she sits down and then topples and then goes on her face. When that scene starts, they're first arriving at Barbie, her costume is still very glossy and shiny and glitzy. And then as she starts seeing the things and has a confrontation with Ken and starts taking her clothes off and sits down, the costume designers actually designed several versions of that outfit where it's duller. And then by the time she's in Weird Barbie's house, before America Ferrera does the whole monologue that is the reason she got nominated for an Oscar, it's very muted. You almost can't even see the 3 different color patterns. So as a viewer, we don't actually notice it, but we do subconsciously, I think, and it adds. That's what I'm saying about I don't get it, but something's working here. The other thing is Barbie Land. They created a certain color palette using filters, and the cinematographer, certain colors pop. As soon as they go to the real world, that filter's off, and things are just a little duller. It's not just that, it's corporate world, it's gray and it's black, that the filter's gone. So the joyous brightness of I want to be here, it just goes away, but it's subconscious. So things like that. I Think I Am Ken is a great song. The music is interesting in this film. Mark Ronson was the main music guy. He's like a rock guy. The song in the beginning is sung by Lizzo, if you know her. But what the director decided to do was they shot the scene, showed it. Lizzo had the rhythm and the beat and the melody, and she actually improvised the lyrics, just basically singing what she's seeing. And then they did it again when things were just a little off the second time. So that opening scene, they repeated it. That was obvious. But so everything was choreographed with the camera, with the waving. You saw another Barbie behind her, doing the same thing. That whole, hi Barbie, hi Barbie, hi, that whole thing. Then when they did it again, they kept the camera doing what it's supposed to do, but Margot was just slightly off. She got out of bed a little more slowly, and the framing was just weird, what just happened? And then obviously when she was gonna float down the house, she fell, but the camera still did what she was supposed to. So the camera did this while she did that. So she fell out of frame, and the camera gently came back down. And almost the camera's what are you doing? You're messing up here. That's the meta aspect. So I do think there's a lot to it. But they need 10 films now. There's other things that have to do with Oscars. There's 10 films, they want to get popular films in there. I think it's worth, out of the 10, I don't think it's going to win, but I think throwing it at Best Picture nom, why not?
I used to recommend to students to watch a movie that they really liked 3 times. One, just watch the movie, and then the second time, watch it with no sound, and you will see things that you never saw before. And then watch it a third time with the sound back up, and you will hear things that you never heard before. Filmmaking is really an amazing medium in terms of the collaborative element of it. It's extraordinary, I think.
Was there any, statement about the relationship between God and man? At the end of the movie, the Creator is holding her hand and saying, I'm thinking as a theologian, I'm seeing God speaking to his creation. You can be anything you want. And she's a little afraid, but then she disappears and kind of leaves her on her own. And I don't know, what, am I on the right track here? Is there something in that? Do you think?
I do. I think, is it okay? But, I think that one way of looking at that is it's open theism. God doesn't know what's going to happen, and so he, or she in this case, is just waiting to see what the creation does. And if that is what's going on there, certainly that's a theology that Christians don't want to embrace. But in the realm of theodicy, in the realm of how do we understand a good sovereign God who knows everything in a world that's really messed up? Going way back into the ancient church, there is this notion of what's called soul making, that God created a world in which evil would exist, and that through the experience of evil, we develop, we mature, we grow as people. Our souls, so to speak, are formed. You even see a little bit of that in C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters. And so, in some ways, I see Barbie's interaction with her creator actually more along those lines. That there is freedom in the world, and that can be awfully scary. But the proper use of freedom can actually liberate and make you a better person. Just one more comment with that. When Barbie is talking to weird Barbie, stereotypical Barbie is talking to weird Barbie says, you got a choice. And then the stereotypical Barbie says, I choose the high heels. And weird Barbie says, just kidding, you don't have a choice. And what I see in there actually is a moral imperative that comes with freedom. You need to do this not just for yourself, but you need to do this for the world. You need to do this for that little girl that's dying in a pile in the real world, and you need to go fix it. So, that's a pretty positive spin, I admit, but I don't think it's reading too much into what's going on there.
The January 24 of 2024 review of the film in the New York Times was headlined, and I quote, "Barbie is bad. There, I said it." And the lengthy review in the New York Times criticized it primarily because of the way the author of the review felt it caricatured key people. Would you respond to that?
It charactered what? Not everyone heard. What did it character? What was the last line you quoted?
The last line, it argues that the film caricatured those it wanted to criticize rather than engaging with them honestly. In other words, it was a simplified, simplistic, boring movie.
Yeah, I read that article. I can't address that right away because I haven't read it if you want, but I do think by saying Barbie's a bad movie there, I said it, and other things in her article I do think have merit, that separating the movie from a message is possible to do. I think another thing she said was it's the idea. You can like an idea, but not like the execution. So, I think you can like a movie for its production value, but absolutely despise its message. As long as you can articulate that, I think that's likewise, you can absolutely hate a movie, but say, oh, the message was at least something good. That was the main thing I got out of that. The story's been criticized as too simple. There's not really a plot. It's too absurd. It's too silly. I mean, you don't have to like the movie. She also said, by me saying I don't like the movie doesn't mean I'm not a feminist. So that's sort of and if you do like the movie, that means you are a feminist and you sign up for everything that it's saying. But I'll let you.
I think it was John Stuart Mill, if I remember correctly, who wrote an essay on judgment, and it is most well remembered for his saying that there is no disputing over taste. If you don't like this kind of movie, fine, go watch Oppenheimer or something. So that's an option. Another option is that you like this kind of movie, but you don't think it's well done. I mean, that's on the table too. But what Mill says further along in that essay is there's no disputing over taste. Beauty may be in the eye of the beholder, but some beholders are more keen beholders than others. The ability to analyze, the ability to see can be cultivated, can be learned. And I respect this person's view and opinion and her taste in terms of the movie, but I think she's missing a lot. Is it a she? I think that it's a she. I think that she's missing a lot in terms of what's going on in the movie. I think that some things that she says aren't there, I think are.
And also, I don't know if I agree with her that it's not critiquing. It's characterizing the things it's critiquing. That's the point of the movie. I mean, the movie is a giant contradiction, just like Barbie is. Is it women empowerment or is it putting women back 50? The whole thing. I mean, Barbie's been disputed and debated since Barbie came out. That's why I made a point to say mothers have always had a problem with Barbie's figure from day one. But somehow Barbie overcame that and has sold 1 billion dolls. Is Mattel making this movie to sell toys? They say, no, we want art. Are they selling toys? They sure are. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a claim, if I could, and see if you guys, what you think of it. I think the very most important scene in the movie is the scene of Barbie on the bench with the older woman. And Barbie turns to the woman and says, "You're so beautiful." And she says, "I know it." I think that's the linchpin of the whole movie. I think that is where the director speaks most directly, no pun there, to the audience in terms of her worldview. I wondered if anybody feels that way or otherwise.
Greta Gerwig actually said that without that scene, there was no point in making the movie.
Yeah, she was given a note to take it out, and she said, absolutely not. That's the heart of the film. Yep. Also, I think, from scene one, the 2001 parody, that just sets the tone of the film. And she actually said, I wanted some people to make sure they were in the right theater when the movie started, because I thought I was watching Barbie. And then if that film made you be like, what am I looking at? She said, yup. This is not going to be what you're expecting. But right there, it was absurd, it was ridiculous, it was satire, it was little girls smashing babies. What is going on here? At the same time, why is it 2001 parody? What is 2000? So when movies parody other movies, you have to now, what is 2001 about? What is that saying? What is that scene in 2001? And there's a reason. I got a lot of Wizard of Oz out of this movie. they reference West Side Story. Kubrick is mentioned several times. 2001, there was also The Shining mention. The Matrix, yeah, this obvious Matrix moment.
How about the Truman Show?
Sure.
Yeah. And the Truman Show is about the true man show. In other words, Truman is the true man when he self-authenticates himself and he leaves the TV show. He becomes a true man at that point. And Barbie becomes a true woman when she visits her gynecologist.
Yeah, the Singing in the Rain is another one, and then David, so if you know David Lynch, not a lot of us, the whole scene where she first meets Ruth, she was like, I just wanted a David Lynch impossible room, is what she says. So those of you who know what he does, he deals in dreamy, is this real, is this not real, impossible things happening, but the story proceeds anyway.
Well, Ferrera's poignant statement, pleading the case for women that they try to be everyone, and it's almost a possibility, objectified.
Yeah.
Is there any significance to the scene with Barbie's feet? What's going on there? Is that...
Well, I think that was just a catalyst to propel what makes real people different than doll, and Barbie's feet are that way, so she can put on the high heels and all the various different accessories. Her feet, Barbie's very simple. She only moves at her shoulders and her hips and her neck. So her feet, her ankles don't move, so they're always in high heel position. So that was just a catalyst to, you guys ever think about death? When that happened in the commentary, Greta's like, and she just broke the movie. Like, she was establishing Barbie Land, we're watching one movie. You guys ever think about death? And screeching halt, almost like I was expecting every actor to just look at the camera, like, what? But, they didn't quite go there. And then from that moment on, the movie is broken, and we have to try to fix what's happening. So that's just one, that was an easy way to show something's going on with this stereotypical Barbie now. Something in the real world happened to her. Norm?
I thought the message at the end where Ken begins to develop his own identity was a very, very important part of the movie. I found myself thinking, hoping not to give offense, of Marilyn Monroe, who I think to a very large extent, her identity as a person was based on what people thought of her. She really was. But I'm not picking on her. I could think of people, authors and especially politicians, even great politicians and great statesmen, who on some very, very deep level, the adulation of the crowd made them what they were. That was who they were. And I think when Ken realizes, I don't have to be that way, and I ought not to be that way, that is so, so important. People can really, really kind of submerge their identity. Probably women can do that with men. Men can do that with women. You take your identity from the person who loves you. And really, I don't think the Lord meant it that way. Not that way. He meant for us to be our own people, whether you're a guy or a girl.
I think your Marilyn Monroe reference is apropos because, with the Andy Warhol prints of Marilyn, it was just Marilyn, 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 and it's Barbie, 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 Barbie. And what happened to Norma Jean? What happened to the woman that was Marilyn before she became Marilyn? And I think what you have in the movie is that turned upside down. Barbara now is going to go find who she is. She's going to go find herself in the real world.
Another criticism of the film is that it's anti-mother. What does anyone think of that in light of maybe what we've already been discussing? I didn't want to take a stab at that.
Where the dolls are concerned, it felt to me as though it was anti-mother with the little girls who are growing up to be mothers, yeah, in that context, bashing the dolls and breaking them. Midge was taken off the market because she was pregnant, but with America Ferrara, the real mom and the real daughter, we saw growth and change.
Exactly. And just like Greta said she understands what Ken was doing, he's not a villain because he's a doll. Pregnancy in a doll world is weird. Midge really got discontinued. It didn't work. People were wigged out. That was a visual representation of little girls wanting to play with adult dolls. They were, that's not to be taken literally. It was an artistic expression to introduce the movie. This is what you're in for. But that's a big criticism some people are, and that has to be my response. Like, if you take that, that's fine. But let's look at the actual humans in the movie are doing actual human things. The dolls in the movie are doing doll things, and then they're trying to be humans, but they don't know how, and things are broken and upside down and backwards. And Midge still is discontinued, so, yeah.
Another doll that was discontinued was the growing up skipper.
Yeah, almost all the dolls in this movie were real. As you saw in the credits, it was showing you those with the real, and Alan's real, and his it was Alan, and his phrase is, he can wear Ken's clothes. That's his identity. So that's why he was just this weird, sad character, and he didn't really have an ending. And he couldn't get away. He's just Ken, he can wear Ken's clothes.
With the idea of becoming real that was promoted, I'm thinking of Pinocchio, Velvet Goddess, and what's the messaging to the secular world watching that and looking at it becomes real?
So, I think that the movie does promote this notion of a person finding their own identity. And I think that as maybe the secular world would look at the movie, they would say, yeah, I need to find myself. But I suppose my tact might be, in an apologetic direction, is why do you care? Why is your personhood valuable? Why this search? Why even ask the question, as the song asks, what was I made for? There is an implication that there's a telos there, there's a purpose there. And so, from an apologetic point of view, I would say to the non-Christian watching the movie, so what is it about human beings that give them such a drive, such a passion for identity and purpose and value? The squirrels in my backyard, they just eat, sleep, and make baby squirrels. What makes you different? Well, what makes you different is that you were created for a purpose. You have value, it's intrinsic. You don't have to make it on your own. And so I think there's a point of contact there. I think there's a wedge there for the gospel.
Any other questions, comments, anything we didn't touch on that you're curious about?
Is there going to be a Ken movie?
Only within the world of the movie. With the Mojo Dojo Casa houses. Oh, one neat thing, the husband of the mother is her real life husband. The guy who was doing Spanish, that's really America Ferrera's husband. And she's like, he sits at home and he's trying to learn Spanish. Some people took, another big criticism, this is an interesting, there's no positive men representation or the competent. Like, what about the good husbands and the good men out there? The criticism is even the Mattel guys are all idiots. The Kens, you know, we kind of handled that. They're dolls, so they're allowed to be idiots. But then the husband was just sort of, you know, I don't know. Yeah. Thoughts on that?
And the way I would respond to that is when you're dealing with a work of art, whatever it is, you really need to deal with what's there, not what's not there. I think it's just a little unfair to criticize a work of art for what it isn't, if it doesn't intend to be what it isn't. Does that make sense?
It's not an all-encompassing,
Yeah, I mean,
all of humanity. This is, we're going to touch on every topic.
it's a slice of life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.